Welcome to She Said Homestead, the podcast that explores homesteading from a range of perspectives. We're Sage and Mickayla, two homesteaders, each with unique experiences, properties, and future goals for our homesteads. We're discussing various homesteading topics, sharing our personal experiences as women working full-time who are managing homesteads as well, and shining a light on the stories of other inspiring homesteaders.
Before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy our podcast, please consider leaving a review. It really helps us grow and share these homesteading stories with even more people.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about what we wish we knew before we started homesteading. But before we get into that, I want to talk about our weeks. How was your week, Mickayla?
I had an amazing week. I was semi-stressed out earlier in the week because I had a lot of cookies on my schedule for holiday baking. But It was all in preparation for our little party this weekend, and we had a gingerbread contest. I think we were calling it the Gingerbread Thunderdome.
There you go.
Yeah, we had you and all of our other friends that we've met down here over, and Sage annihilated the competition with her greenhouse. That's pretty much all I did. I just baked cookies, and we worked on the Coupe as usual, and we decorated some gingerbread.
Look, if you give me a chance or an opportunity to show up somewhere with a baked good, I'm going to go all out. I don't have a different setting. That's just how it goes.
I'm the same way though. I remember you posted a picture of it on Instagram and I replied to it and I was like, I was going to do that. I'm glad that you were baking yours too, because I was going to be the only one baking my own gingerbread. And
yeah.
The exact term you used was, you can always count on me for unhinged baking decisions. And I heavily relate to that.
100%.
What else did you do this week?
Yeah, so I was there for the gingerbread contest, which was so much fun. And I'm glad that you spent a while decorating yours too, because everyone else was done and it was just me and you at the end. I was like, as long as she's going, I'm going to keep going.
I could have kept going too.
So that was great. And then last night we had some crazy weather out here. It was not only cold, but insanely windy. And so I have all kinds of stuff blown around my homestead. There's sheet metal that I had taken off of the well house to redo it that's now strewn across my front yard. I have a little shed also in my front yard where I put eggs for my neighbors to come, pick up self-service eggs whenever they want to, and it ripped one of the doors straight off the shed, like hinges and all. It just plucked it. So I'm gonna have to fix that at some point.
At least it didn't tip it over this time, right? You have a bunch of
True, yeah.
Or twine.
I rigged it with some hay twine, like what you get off of a hay bale when you open it. So it's not beautifully engineered, but it definitely kept the whole structure up. So that's something.
You need to baling twine the doors shut together at night or something.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, I don't even remember. It wasn't even dark yet. But yeah, that was some wild weather that blew through. But somehow my low tunnels survived it, which I was not convinced that there were still going to be plants under those when I checked them this morning, but surprisingly they were good. I think I've actually zeroed in on a decent method to keep them alive. I did the agribon on top like a blanket, and then the low tunnels with greenhouse plastic over that, and that's done way better than anything else I've tried.
Yeah, I kind of just abandoned mine. They just have the insect netting on them still to try and keep the chickens away, and that hasn't worked, so mine are killed. I still have cilantro though, so it likes the ice. Cilantro and parsley. Actually, celery. That tastes like parsley.
Celery? Well, are they related? Because their leaves look almost identical. Maybe that's a stupid question.
So I picked it. They're really small, and I picked it thinking it was parsley for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then I remember a few days after that, I went back out there and I was looking at it. I was like, this is celery. I remember planting celery here, not parsley. And it tasted exactly like parsley. So
nobody said anything. Nobody knew. So
no, fine. They're good. It was delicious. So some of you guys might be noticing that we are missing someone that we had in the last 2 episodes. And it's going to be like that from now on, unfortunately.
Red had some scheduling constraints and she wanted to be involved in the podcast, but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And so it's going to be me and Mickayla from here on out. You guys are stuck with us.
Yeah, hopefully in the future we'll be able to have Red on even a few times a year. Would be really cool just to keep her included a little bit, because I know she really did want to be part of it. So unfortunately, I mean, I guess not unfortunately, but sort of unfortunately, if you liked the trio, it's just the 2 of us now. So sorry about that. But
We'll still have fun. It's all good.
It's going to be good still, I think. Speaking of time commitments and overcommitting ourselves, today, like Sage said earlier, we're talking about things we wish we knew before we started homesteading. So I think that's point number 1 for both of us.
Definitely. I am someone who has always viewed myself as able to get things done quickly and well and efficiently, and homesteading has humbled me. That is without doubt. Planting a garden the size of a homestead garden, if you are fortunate enough to have land, and I know my garden is a little bit shy of a 1/4 acre. I don't know what yours is, Mickayla, but to plant all of that pretty much right at the end of the season of frost, oh my goodness, it is a different kind of challenge.
Yeah, I actually think our gardens are very similar in size now that I've actually been to your property and like seen the garden. Looking at them, my garden space is like a 1/2 acre, but we're not using all of it. We're using about a third of it, a 1/4 of it maybe. So I think they're about the same size. And this first year, getting that set up, I spent from January until I was supposed to be planting things, getting that set up. Like on a daily basis, every day, trying to get those beds put together from scratch with that clay soil. That in itself, I was like completely underestimating because of the clay. I didn't think it would be that difficult. But man, trying to get the beds prepped and plant in them at the same time, like shuffling all that around was very, very difficult this year. And I'm thankful to not have to do that completely next year because I'm not really adding any beds this year. Are you?
I don't think so. I might lengthen some of my beds, but I'm not. Well, no, I lied. I am totally adding another bed to the end.
I mean,
there's a section.
We also just put in a bunch of raised beds for you, so there's that.
Yeah, okay, so different garden space, which I completely forgot about. So there's the garden that I have for food, which I have fenced, and so it can't really expand. I am adding a bed to that at the very end, where it's so far been too hard for me to get in there with a broad fork and actually make a bed. But I'm adding entirely new gardens. I'm basically converting my front yard from grass into just a massive growing space, partially because I'm sick of maintaining the front yard. I don't have time to mow a front yard. That's a ridiculous notion in my mind. I would rather be doing so many other things. And the other part is I want to grow just an absolutely irresponsible amount of flowers. So that's my plan. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it.
I mean, first of all, I would say there's not any such things as too many flowers. Like, you can't get irresponsible with flowers. I guess I'll wait and see what your garden looks like, but
yeah. Wait to see how unhinged I get with it, and then
definitely the first year, and I guess you're another year in, an extra year in than I
I'm
am.
an extra season in for sure.
Yeah, an extra season of, I guess, a summer season of gardening in. So you can tell me, was it any less stressful as far as like getting things planted this year as it was your first year, like trying to get everything set up and planted? Or do you think it was about the same? because you
It
expanded.
was a different beast. So the first year I was converting an old it's called a sacrifice paddock. It's basically where you put your animals in the winter so that they can tear up. You sacrifice the land. It's gonna get compacted. There's not gonna be any grass in there. It's gonna be, you know, it's degrading that paddock that you give them, but it keeps the rest of your pasture nice. So that's where the people who own the property before me, they kept their horse or horses in there all the time. And that's where I put my garden. I put it in the worst soil on my entire property, partially because I wanted the pasture. I wanted to keep that. I didn't want to tear that up. Um, and it also gets great light, and there was a lot of potential there. It was also partially fenced in. It made sense to convert that space into something else. And
Mhm.
so I took on that ridiculous challenge. And last year, what I did was I made a bunch of, I don't know, 20 rows of 2.5 foot wide beds. So it's basically the width of a broad fork.
Yep.
And put that infrastructure in, composted it. Great. That's what I grew in the first year that I was gardening here. And then this most recent year, 2023 growing season, I did still make a bunch of improvements. So I expanded those beds from 2.5 feet wide to 6 feet wide. Essentially, that just meant that I broad forked every other foot pathway. And so I was still adding growing space to it and, developing the infrastructure in that space. I also added a cattle panel trellis. So it was still a lot of work to prepare it, but you could not pay me enough money to go back to how it was the year previous. The amount of work that myself and my partner at the time put into that was just astronomical.
So I think we did similar things because the area our garden is in was definitely an old paddock, and it was, when we got here, it was taller than me grass.
Oh
So we
gosh.
basically just cut it all down, and it's different types of weeds and grass and stuff. We just cut it down, and it's rock solid. I don't think that we could have chosen worse soil on our property, because it's at the top of our property too. Other than our trash jungle over there, in the kudzu, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
The kudzu trash jungle would have been worse.
like the soil over there is better, but the trash obviously wouldn't be good. So
Right.
we had like the same issue where I only had a few months of trying to prepare all those beds, and I think we have like 26 beds or 24 beds or something, and they're 4 foot by 12 foot or 24 foot. They're different sizes. They're all 4 foot wide though. And I was trying to get it going all at once, and it's solid clay. So I was like, I have to till this. I did, I think, four or five no-till beds, and those ones are so much better shape this year than any of the tilled ones. So this year I'm doing a similar thing where I am transitioning all of those tilled beds to no-till as much as I can with the like leaves and everything we have on our property. The reason I couldn't do it last year is because I didn't have the input for it.
Right.
So I don't know. A lot of time either
I'm
way.
curious. Are you transitioning it to no till, or are you transitioning it to no dig? Will you broad fork it or hand dig it at all?
I think it depends on the bed, because there are some things where I'm not sure it would work as well for me personally to do no dig, but I do think the majority of them I want to try and do no dig. We're at least going to test it out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I do want to try and do, I don't remember exactly what it's called, who made the process, but the potatoes where it's just like on the ground and then you do straw around and they just grow in the straw. That kind of thing. We want to
Isn't
try
that
some different stuff.
isn't that Ruth Stout, or is Ruth
I
Stout
think it
different?
I think it's a version of Ruth Stout. I think
Okay.
Ruth Stout might be a little bit different, but I don't remember right now. I'd have to look into it a little bit more. I researched it at one point, but it didn't stick.
With the other millions of things that you
Yeah.
research probably on a daily basis.
Yes. Exactly. But yeah, so the garden for me, this first year was a beast getting set up time-wise. And then our other thing that took up a majority of our time this year was the Coupe. And we're still working on that. But we had to start like clearing in January last year. So it was almost a whole year ago that we started that process for the Coupe. And we're like wrapping it up in the next few weeks probably. So that's exciting.
But because you all spent so much time doing that correctly and doing it, in all of the ways, it's going to stand the test of time. And so you're going to save the time and energy that you would have otherwise had to in order to rebuild it, right? And so
yeah,
that
exactly.
commitment's worth it. It's just it is painful to build everything all at once and
I
not
feel
have
like
the energy at the end of the day to do whatever else you want to do.
it's also a matter of like for us sacrificing the time now. It's been a lot, but we really were trying to plan it out so that the future us will be very thankful. Because right now, and since we've gotten our birds, it's been a lot of stress in the mornings for me trying to like take care of them, and because they've been in those temporary situations. But 2 days ago, when we put them in their coop for the first time, it's been significantly easier since then. I know once we get their water situation set up, it's going to be even faster in the morning. So like we really set ourselves up for this period in our lives. Like in the future, we want to do some mobile coops and stuff like that with our older birds just to improve the soil. But for now, I need the coop by itself so I can just not worry about them. I don't have to worry about moving them every day. I need that mental load off of me.
Yeah.
So I think we did what's best for us right now, and that building is going to stand the test of time, and we can change its function in the future. We like designed it that way. So.
Absolutely. It's not only a financial investment to start a homestead, it's an investment of your time. And the point is that it is hopefully going to pay off in the future, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's brutal in the short term.
Moving on to the next thing that was on my list of things I didn't know or things that I wish I knew before we started is I don't know how to rest. I don't know how to let myself recover. And that was a big wake up call because I have been go, 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 go since I graduated high school. Like architecture school is no joke. And let me tell you, homesteading has kicked architecture school out of the running for first place on.
Yeah, burnout is, in my opinion, unavoidable unless you are very intentional with yourself and very upfront about yourself and very self-aware. You're going to run into that wall so fast. It doesn't matter what kind of capacity you have as a person.
I feel like even if you know your limits and are aware of the burnout that's happening, you still, at least me as a person, I'm like, okay, but like once I get this done, like I'm just
one
always
more
gonna,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
I'm
there's
not
always
good.
going to be one more thing.
Mhm. So I'm trying so hard to like teach myself to rest, but I'm definitely not good at it yet still. I've recognized at this point that I have a problem. I've acknowledged it.
That's the first step.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm bad about that too. I last year, the first year that I was doing it, I didn't stop until I at least partially slipped a disc in my back. Like that's what it took. My
Mhm.
body had to make me stop. And then because I didn't respect my physical limits, before I got to the point, it just made it even harder. More time to recover in order to jump back into things. So, yeah, it's difficult.
I don't have a solution to it. I'm still working on that. And I think as we set up our homesteads and set up the streamlined version of whatever we want our homestead to be, I think it can get easier in the future, but I also think it's just a matter of like we we also have jobs we are taking on a lot in general. We're doing a podcast.
Right.
For YouTubers. Like, we've got a lot going on, and like, I'm okay with it. I do really, I have like acknowledged that, and I really want to try and build in rest to my schedule more often, because I know if I don't, it's definitely not going to happen. But that is something that it hit me hard. I did not realize how bad I was at resting until my body was like, you can't move. Stay
Yeah,
still.
and I think just largely in general, I mean, especially as an American society, you hear pull yourself up by your bootstraps all the time. And so I think just generally how all of us were raised, if we're in the US, that's rest isn't something that people tell you to do. That's something people tell you to do less. It's like, well, go work more, you know?
Yeah.
And so if we're not good about making space for it, internally or as a community, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a whole we could do a whole podcast episode on that alone.
Yeah.
I don't know that we
Yeah.
should. I don't know that we should,
No.
but yeah, that's
Not
that's
unless we want to get super controversial things. Anyway.
I think another thing that like ties into that too is the fact that, I mean, I guess including Red in this conversation a little bit, like them, her and her husband, you and me and Taylor, none of us came here and started this with community. Like, we are here doing this by ourselves. We didn't physically meet you. Taylor met you this weekend or last weekend. And I
Yeah.
didn't meet you until I
Yeah.
was here for 6 months already. So like,
Mhm.
I feel like we're building community now, and we have our neighbors. We could ask for help now that we know them and have met them. But when we moved here, it was just us. And so we were trying to do everything by ourselves, like on top of just living normal life, like cooking food and doing laundry and doing dishes and renovating a house. We were just trying to
Yeah.
do everything by ourselves.
Yeah, I definitely have people that I can go to for certain things. You know, like if I really needed help with my chickens, if I got into a bind, I have a friend that I could call and be like, "Hey, can you help me harvest my chickens? I can't do this, or something else fell through." Or if I really need something from my neighbors, I can go ask. But for the day-to-day, the stuff that's got to get done all the time, the routine stuff, that is just us. So it's get up in the morning, feed the animals, move the animals if they need to be moved, go to work, log off of work, go to the garden, pick what needs to be picked. Again, feed the animals if they need to be fed again, move them if they need to be moved. Come inside, make dinner, and then make sure that the produce, the sometimes 5-gallon bucket of food that I picked gets eaten in my dinner or set aside to be preserved or preserved right at that moment. That is so much to keep up with.
Being perfectly candid, I can't tell you how many times we were getting the garden set up, or I'd plant an entire 4 garden beds worth of stuff, and I'd be so exhausted at the end of the day. Like, I literally can't move, that I'd be like, hey, we're ordering Domino's, even though I just planted like our organic garden for that's going to be ready in 2 months from now. Like, it happened so much this summer because I was just so exhausted.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're not alone in that. The first year that I was here, I think we were getting at least 3 meals a week, if not 4 or 5, was convenience food. It was either something that we're picking up from a fast food or fast casual place in Weaverville, or like a sandwich with not homemade bread, not
Mhm.
anything homegrown, just what I have the energy to put together and put in my face right now so that I
Yeah.
can survive. Yeah.
So I can like half fall asleep on the couch for the last hour of the night before I have to go to bed and wake up and go to work in the morning. I think that's not something that people talk about very much, because nobody wants to say, yeah, I have a homestead and I grow all this organic food and blah, 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 blah. But I get Domino's once a week because I can't function enough
Right.
after working all day to make dinner.
At at the end of the day, You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah. No, some food is better than no food. I feel like that is something that I've literally never heard another homestead channel or anyone on Instagram or anything. Like nobody ever says, "Oh yeah, we get takeout or we do this occasionally or more than once a year," you know? Like nobody says that
Yeah.
because it looks bad, but like that's the reality of it. At least for
Yeah.
me.
And I know, I mean, I grew a stupid amount of squash this year, and I love squash. And I don't buy squash at the store now that I grow my own squash because it tastes completely different and I can't do it. But I didn't manage to blanch and freeze or otherwise preserve any of it this year. If I didn't eat it fresh right after I picked it, it went to the chickens or it went in the compost.
I mean, that's still a way of using it though. So that's not like there's nothing to be ashamed of with that because you're growing food for your animals at the same time, right? Like that's
Yeah,
awesome.
but now
But
that it's winter
you wish that
and
you had it.
I wish it was sitting in my fridge for me to throw into a stir fry or a soup or whatever because it would be so good. But again, I refuse. I refuse to buy squash and green beans from the store. It's just not going to
Mhm.
happen.
I literally ordered groceries because I don't have time to go to the grocery store. I just ordered green beans for our Christmas dinner because Taylor asked to have green beans and we ate them all fresh. Because we had so many bugs this year, I got maybe like 5 zucchini total that we got to eat, and we made zucchini fritters with those. And we ate all of the fresh green beans that we got, and there weren't that many because of the bugs. So
Girl, you should have told me. I would have brought green beans to the gingerbread Thunderdome.
I didn't know until today that we were having green beans.
Okay.
I mean, I should have. That's his favorite. Like he always asks for green beans. That's all he ever wants for veggies. So
I am
growing
very
one.
picky about my green beans. I take my green beans very, very seriously. I'm just
He
saying.
just loves green beans. That's all he ever wants.
And, it's not only the time constraints that I wish I knew about. I wish I knew or had at least a better concept of how expensive it is to invest in all of these things. I mean, I had some idea, right? Like building new things and buying new stuff to make all this infrastructure costs something, but I the amount of money that I have dropped on fencing alone, I never would have guessed. So I have the perimeter fence that goes around my pasture area, which is T-posts and single strand that's hefty, and then all the clips to go to that, and then the grounding rods and the energizer for 1,000-foot perimeter fence. It's a decent chunk. And then there's all of the mobile fencing. So I have Premier One nets for the chickens. I have 260-foot nets and two 100-foot nets because turkeys, one laying flock, second laying flock, and meat birds if when I have them. So there's that. And then on top of that, there's the single strand fencing for the sheep and the reels and the what is it called? Fiberglass posts that go with that are movable. Oh my gosh.
That's
So
a
much.
lot.
And that's just fences, right? Like that's not even animals or feeding them or seeds or tools.
The tools. Taylor already had a lot of tools, but we've had to buy a lot of tools. Like a lot of tools. I can't imagine having to start this without any. Like I'm glad we had some. That's what I was just gonna say. You probably had to start from scratch, and that's
Absolute
crazy.
scratch. Yeah.
Not to
I had a
mention,
hammer and a screwdriver.
I was gonna say, not to mention, like we were talking about this earlier because I was trying to think of what I wish I knew, and Taylor's like saying how expensive things are. And I'm like, yeah, just the point in time in which we are starting this personally, how expensive everything is. Not just homestead stuff, not just tools, not just fencing or feed. Literally everything is expensive, significantly
Yes.
more expensive than it was a few years ago. And that's really hard. That just like adds salt to the wound.
Right. I mean, my personal motivation for starting a homestead wasn't necessarily saving money, but I am so glad that I started this before all of this economic stuff started to go down, and you can think whatever you want about that, but I am glad that I have a bunch of growing space. I am glad that I have a higher level of self-sufficiency than I did before. I know from the last episode, I know how you feel about that word, Mickayla.
No, I like when you say it like that, like I don't disagree with like trying to learn skills and being knowledgeable about like taking things into your own hands, because I think it's more important, or I think it's important for more reasons than just being self-sufficient. But yeah, I'm very, very grateful to have the space. And I think honestly, just this year and the next few years, probably we won't be saving money on things. But I think after we get our stuff set up, we will start saving money significantly on like food. And like this year, we had to buy a bunch of jars. We won't have to do that in the future, at least not as many. Um, and our grocery budget's already reduced significantly just by stuff that I've canned. So I think I can see it paying off. I'm just as grateful. Like I think it's a good decision overall.
Yeah, that the grocery budget is a good point to bring up. I remember getting excited. I was like, I'm gonna spend basically nothing at the grocery store. And my perception is that as prices have risen, I've gotten a little I've gotten pieces taken off of that, but my grocery budget has stayed the same. Now, if I had to buy everything at the grocery store like I used to, I'm sure it would be almost twice as expensive. But that was one thing that I was like, really, man? I
Okay,
wanted
I'm
that
curious.
number to come down.
How much do you grocery shop just like normal, like a weekly basis?
I do. I look like I live off of steak, chocolate, and soy milk. I think the cashiers are concerned for me, but yeah, I totally go to the grocery store. And obviously, that looks different in different seasons. When it's August and I have 30 pounds of tomatoes sitting on my counter and a bunch of peppers, yeah, I can throw together several meals in a week that are entirely from my homestead. But in January, February, I'm buying vegetables in the produce section. I definitely don't have to buy chicken. I don't think I have to buy chicken for a couple years, even if I didn't raise any from here on out. But I I still do go grocery shopping weekly. It's more, supplies for the house, it's pet food. It's less actual meal stuff, if that makes
How
sense.
much? It's similar for us. I'm curious how much you usually like. Do you have like an average of what you spend a week roughly?
Yeah, so I
If you're okay
try.
saying that.
And for context, like, I don't spend my money on like new clothes or jewelry and all this stuff. I spend my money on food.
Me too.
That is what I've always done. And so my grocery budget has always been like, I try to aim for 100.
Okay.
Just for me as a person,
Hmm.
no other people, just me. That's it. Um, if I'm gonna eat, I'm gonna eat good food. That's my perspective on it. Um, and yeah, it's definitely creeped into the more like 120 and stuff, especially when I'm like buying my stock of flour for the month or whatever.
Hmm.
Olive oil is also a decent chunk on those. When I buy those, I notice it go above that. Do you mind if I ask you the same question?
I'm just thinking about how expensive olive oil has gotten. Um, in the past, I'd say I started tracking this around early 2020 about how much we spend.
Hmm.
And back then, we were living in Charlotte, and I'd say it was around $75 to $100 a week for the both of us. And we shopped mostly at Aldi there. So Taylor, he usually brings breakfast, lunch, a snack to work. And then we have dinner, and I usually also make dessert. And then I usually have sometimes breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then the dessert. So just that's, you know, context for that. I do try my best to make as much stuff as possible homemade, and I do meal prep. So like we plan for 2 meals a week, and we eat them for 3 days each. And then we have pizza on Sundays. And we do the same with lunches and stuff. So like we each have one breakfast for the whole week. We each have one lunch for the whole week. So that like I only have to make 4 things for the week.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, it's still a lot of food that we have to make and everything. But I've managed to, like, our actual weekly grocery budget, I can usually keep it still at $100. Recently, it's been about $50 to $75 because I've been using so much of our canned food. But when I have to buy paper towel or toilet paper or things like that, it does go up significantly. Pet food, that's not included in that because I have to order it online because our cats are needy and special and they need their $100 prescription food off of Chewy.
Spoiled cats.
Yeah. And then I also usually order from Azure Standard monthly and I spend about $100. So I would say overall I probably spend like 100 to 130-ish per week if you like averaged it all out. Which, that's not bad.
Not
For
at
2
all.
people. I'm just very, very
Here's
careful about it. Like,
here's
I
another
plan it out.
question. So, how much do you have a weekly eating out budget? Because like for me, I really don't eat out even when I was living in the city, like maybe once a week. And so for me, that $100 that I usually spend is straight up my food for the week. There's
Yeah.
no supplementing that really.
Honestly, no. It's a very random occasions that we eat out because it's literally usually when we're just too exhausted or I haven't had time to prep something. So like this weekend, Hunter was here, his friend, and we always go to the Mexican restaurant when he's here. So we went out for Mexican food last night and I just remembered I have taquitos in the fridge that I didn't eat today, and now I'm sad about that. That sounds delicious.
Tomorrow. That gets to be a surprise for tomorrow. That's
Yeah.
not sad. That's happy.
So it's just really random. And then usually if we are going out, it's exhausted Domino's. That's
Yep.
usually what we get because we don't have a lot here that's open late. And usually when we're done working on things, it's late. So I don't
Yeah.
have a
And
bucket.
Domino's is tasty. It is carbs, it replaces the calories that you very much need because you busted your butt all day, and
Mm-hmm.
it's open.
Yeah,
Those
it's
3 things.
open. That's the key. It's open. And also it fills
Yeah.
me with delicious bread and cheese and then I can go to sleep afterwards. Puts
I'm
me into a
okay.
coma.
This is kind of embarrassing, but I feel like I'm getting to that age where if I eat food that has too much energy, which like carbs have a bunch of energy, right? My body processes it and I cannot fall asleep. I'm fine with coffee. I can drink coffee all day long, but you cannot feed me bread at night.
I feel like you
Oh my
need like
gosh.
a t-shirt that says that. Or like a bumper sticker.
Does that make me a gremlin? I think it makes me a gremlin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't feed me.
Honestly, that's actually a good thought. I've never really considered that. But we do eat like really late and I also don't sleep very well. But I also don't sleep early. So yeah, so I mean, we don't have like an actual budget. I just try and stick. I mean, I get what we need. Like we have the money to get what we need, but I try and keep it as low as I possibly can by making as much food at home as I possibly can and just getting the ingredients. And I'm getting Azure Standard stuff so that I can build up a little bit of a pantry to have to fall back on with like I'm not working consistent hours right now. So like that's a little bit scary with being able to afford groceries and stuff as prices are
Yeah.
rising. So that's why like I have a couple 5-gallon buckets of flour and sugar just to have as backup.
How much money do you think you save, or have you noticed that you save when you order in bulk from Azure Standard? I've wanted to order from there, but their whole pickup process is a little too intimidating for me, and I don't feel like I can tell work like, "Hey, sorry, I'm gonna take a 45-minute break to go unload a truck to get 50 pounds of flour." What is that
So
like, and how much money do you think you save?
I am the crazy person that really likes numbers. And before I order anything, I will literally like price check it with the places that we shop to make sure I can't get it cheaper per pound or ounce or whatever it's listed at
Mhm.
through Walmart or Aldi or something, but I do buy organic. I try and get it at Azure because it's the best place for me to get organic stuff, because I can't get a 25-pound bag of organic flour at our Walmart. Not for at all, let alone a good price. And the same with organic cane sugar. I can't get that at Walmart. It's like really expensive for a small bag. Like you can get it there, but you save money. Like I price check everything. And if I can't get it cheaper through Azure by the pound or per ounce or whatever, then I don't. I just like cheese. The normal cheese at Walmart is cheaper. So I don't get the 5-pound blocks from Azure, even though you can get organic ones there. That's like almost twice the price. So it's just a matter of balancing that. And I just check everything that I want to get. So like I'll add stuff to my favorites list, but you also have to factor in the shipping percentage cost and all that kind of stuff. So it's a process.
Okay.
I kind of have it figured out now, though, with like what things I want to order there and what I don't. I'm sure that will change over time, but flour and sugar are definitely cheaper there for me. And I also don't have the issue with having to go pick it up because our neighbors, like, they run the drop. So if I need
That's
to,
so nice.
I know I can just go pick it up from Meg and Ben later in the day. And that's usually what I do because I don't have a vehicle that works. And Taylor's usually an hour away at work. So I usually either go pick it up at the Holler's house or they'll drop it off on their way back. So that's the only way I can do it, unfortunately.
I wish
That's
I
not
lived.
everyone's.
I wish I lived a couple minutes away from dollars. That sounds like a great deal.
I know, they're great neighbors.
Except when they get called dibs on the mulch pile before you do.
Yeah. Yeah, Meg. We'll have to talk about that sometime.
That brings up a good point. I mean, not only sourcing different quality items where you can find them, but I know one of the main motivations for me raising my own meat, like it's not fun to harvest chickens. I wouldn't do it if that wasn't worth it to me. And so it's not always the cost translation. Like I can get organic chicken at the grocery store, but in my opinion, that's still not comparable to what I can raise on my own land, know exactly how they were raised, know exactly how humane the end of their life was, and exactly what they ate, and how happy they were when they were alive.
I mean,
That's
not to
something
mention,
that you can't price that.
you get to have them on your property and move them how you want to move them and improve your property at the same time. And you have compost from them and you can use them for composters. Like you complete your little circle with them too. I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
those
they
are,
play a larger role than
Mhm.
just feeding me dinner.
I will say also, I just tasted the chicken that the Hollers so I helped them butcher their chickens and they gave me a handful of packages of it to take home. And I just tasted it for the first time last week when I made chicken Alfredo. It's literally the best
Mhm.
thing, like the best chicken I've ever tasted. It was so good. They told me it was going to ruin me for any other chicken. And I'm like, they were not wrong. It's very good and very tender. I was surprised.
And theirs is probably Cornish cross, right?
The Red Ranger
Oh, that
ones.
was Red Ranger. Red Rangers are good.
Yeah, it was
They're very
delicious.
good. In my experience, they're a little tough, especially the red meat, but it does taste way different than any other chicken. It is cool.
It was super tender. I don't know if it's just how I cooked it or what, but it was like fall apart really, really, really tender. So I don't know.
And
I've
now
never
you're like,
tried the
"Ugh,
Cornish.
I can't I
I
can't go
mean,
back to the store."
I'm not gonna hate on my $2 Salvage Store chickens because that's like my whole freezer's full of them, and that's another way that I save money is we shop at the Salvage Store a lot. I can't remember if we've talked about that on here or not yet, but
A
that's
little bit,
a
yeah.
huge thing. Like we get a lot of snacks there. We get a lot of our coffee there because sometimes we just want like pre-ground cheap coffee so we don't have to spend $30 on the really nice local stuff. Like we switch back and forth between them, and it's like $3, $2 a bag there. So we get a lot of that there. We get a lot of bacon is $2 for a package there. Rolled sausage is $1 usually. So a lot of frozen stuff. My whole freezer's filled with that, and that is probably actually the biggest way that I save money. I buy all my meat there.
Yeah, if I had one and knew of one near me, I would totally be doing the same thing.
Let's go next week.
Don't say something. Don't tease me. If you say it, we're going to do it.
I'm always down for a Salvage Store trip.
That'll be my Christmas presents to myself. Just a bunch of food.
I mean, so we have a local butcher here, and they have like a little store and everything, but they also send their meat to this store. So I know it's like local meat too. It doesn't like
That's
they don't
great.
say that, but on the
Yeah.
Facebook page, like people have commented and said that it's from this local butcher, which is really cool. And they have a fresh deli there too that you can get cuts and everything. So it's awesome.
I think I'm just going to come live with you, Mickayla.
Just give Chrissy your house. Bring your sheep.
She would not protest. Moving away from sort of the more material points and into the more experiential points, at least for me, what I wish I knew before I got started in all of this is that people will give you advice. Don't take it. If it makes sense to you, if you agree with it, but if I followed all the advice or even most of the advice that people gave me, one, I wouldn't be homesteading because I would have been terrified out of it. I would have been scared out of it. And two, I would be doing things not in a way that I enjoy, and it wouldn't work for me. And so I wish before I started that I had someone give me permission to ignore everything that everyone says. Like, trust you, trust your gut, trust your own research, however you want to do it. There's no one way to do this. There's no one correct thing to do. And if you want to ignore people, ignore them.
This is a really fun way of you saying that you don't know how to follow rules.
Yes, also true. I only learn rules so that I can break them.
Yeah. Okay,
Not
so
like unethically. Like I'm not out here like lying and cheating and stealing, but also I am a little pathological with being a rebel.
So I'm curious where you are getting most of your advice from. Like, who is telling you should do this way?
Oh, it comes from a lot of different places. Because we're YouTubers, I know I'm not singular in this experience. People will leave all kinds of advice in your comments telling you how you should do things. I know people tell me all the time, "Oh, you should throw fertilizer down." And I'm like, "You clearly did not watch my video because I don't use chemical fertilizer. I'm not going to tell anybody how they should run their place, but for me, it's compost, it's chicken poop, it's sheep poop, and it's wood ash. Beyond that, I don't add anything."
I mean, I also feel like, okay, so just to put a disclaimer in this, I appreciate people trying to be helpful, and I appreciate people commenting and engaging with our videos, but there's just no possible way I could take everyone's advice because they're all different. Like, most of them are contradicting each other, which is fine. Yeah. That means people are doing what works for them, and that's what I want to promote because we're doing what works best for us. So do you get it from YouTube? Do you get it from neighbors, family?
Neighbors is another one. So I do live in a more rural community. That's where I can afford land. I've had people tell me that if I got sheep, that they would rip all my grass out and my whole pasture would be dirt. I'm sure there are circumstances where that happened. If I didn't feed them hay, yeah, they would eat what they could eat and they would tear up the pasture. I've gotten it from, just random people that I meet and they're like, "Hey, what are you about?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm actually really weird. I homestead." And they'll reach into the recesses of their brain and pull out, whatever they might have learned from their grandmother or what they saw other people do. Because a lot of these things that we are doing as homesteaders is using knowledge that has skipped one or two generations. And so, in my opinion, part of it is we haven't been implementing this and that knowledge is lost and people are so excited about sharing it. And I've also gotten good advice. Like not all of it sucks, but most of it doesn't work for me.
I was going to ask if there's like advice that you've gotten that's really actually been beneficial to you, like via YouTube, neighbors, anyone. Do you have anything you've implemented? I can say I have. Like obviously our neighbors are very helpful because they're doing what we're doing, but they're 5 years ahead of us. So
Right. I think that's a challenging question. I'm 100% sure that yes, I've gotten advice from people that has turned out for me. But here's the thing about me. Like if I'm doing something, I'm going to like obsessively research it until I research it so hard that it's like 2 a.m. and I fall asleep.
same.
So there's lots of information gathering in that, and so it depends on where you draw the line at advice, right? So I might be researching what someone else's experience is, and I might not have met them in person, and they're writing this thing to be like, hey, here's how to help other people do this. Um, I have absolutely relied on other people's experiences doing it themselves and seen what they're doing and either interpreted that in my own way or replicated what they've done or what they've told me to do.
I learned how to homestead through YouTube. So my homestead is just a compilation of a billion other people's experiences and like trying to make it work here and experimenting with things. And some things haven't worked out exactly how I'd hoped, or they're just not to the point yet where I can tell if they've worked out because we're so new here still. Like earlier today, I was just watching like setting up no dig garden beds from scratch with grass because I want to refresh my memory on it. I watched probably 30 videos this morning about that, and they're all different, which is really cool. But
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many Charles Dowding videos I watched when I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to garden with a tiller. Like, who's someone doing it? And he's great, and he's been at his place, which is called Homemakers, for like something crazy like 20 or 30 years. So it's really cool to see how he's done things, and he's done experimental beds and stuff like that. So yeah, learning from people's real world experience and implementing it. I think that's advice. So I'll say
yeah,
yes
I would
to that.
consider it. I would consider it advice.
I mean, and this might not be everyone's experience, but I know that for me, another thing that I wish someone would have kind of given me permission, not that I needed it, but it's nice to hear when you need to hear it, that not everyone's going to understand your decision. And they don't need to understand your decision, but they do need to respect your autonomy and sovereignty as a human and let you make your decision. So if you need to hear that, there it is.
This feels like a family thing.
No, and it's not even uniquely my experience. It's people around me. I won't name them, but people around me have similar experiences where, you know, people might wonder what's going on in your life if you're like, hey, I'm going to move out of the city to this totally other place and I'm going to start growing my own food and, do all these other things to make money on the side. And for some people, even move away from my career, it doesn't make me happy. People are like, because it can be so contrary to how they've known you the entire rest of your life, right? Yeah, and to some extent speaking from my own experience and to some extent not speaking from my own experience.
I feel like we talked about this a little bit in the last episode about like people in our friends and family, like what they thought of when we said we were going to homestead. And honestly, for me, like my family has been very supportive and I think it made sense to them. Same with my friends, because a lot of my friends I became friends with when I started getting into gardening more. And like, I don't have a lot of friends from when I was younger still. Like, I don't talk to them on a consistent basis. So it's not a surprise to my current friends that this is the world that I'm in. And they're all kind of similar too. But like my proudest thing, the thing that makes me the most happy to hear, is my grandpa told me he is so proud of us and that he thinks it's like a super smart decision that we bought 8 acres and like we have this land and it's in a good location and it will be worth a lot more. And I'm like, oh, I needed to hear that.
Yeah, I don't have the privilege of my grandparents still being alive, but I can imagine if they were still alive, they would be ecstatic. They would be like, "Yes, that's exactly what you should do."
My great grandpa, and I guess my great grandma a little bit too, like they lived in the city, but they had a garden and they preserved food and all that kind of stuff. And my grandma, she, like, the first thing she asked was if I wanted some of the canning recipes, and she's like, oh, I would have given you some of their canning supplies and stuff when they passed away if I had known that you were going to do this. So like that's a bummer, but it's still really cool to just like have that connection, to know that that was 2 generations behind. Like, I'm doing that again and bringing it back to the family. And because like my mom doesn't cook, she doesn't garden.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always like, "Yeah, no one no one understands it and everyone just wants me to be a totally different person." I promise I have other settings and other relationships, but
Everyone's trying to tell me what to do. And no one supports
I don't
me.
want your advice. I don't want you to tell me what to do. Just want you to leave me alone.
Okay, so I think hearing those kinds of things and just the experience of our first year here has also led me to another thing that I didn't expect to feel, and that's just how gratifying literally this entire thing is. No matter how much money I've spent, no matter how tired I am, and no matter how busy I am, it's just so cool to grow things and to have the possibility of growing more things next year, and meeting our birds and getting to know them, and just seeing the property change throughout the year with how much we've done. This it feels so good. Do you feel the same way? Like, do you feel the it feels good?
Yeah. I mean, mine is, when I made this life change, because it's basically what it is, right? To move from somewhere very suburban and the opposite of this life structure to moving into doing this, I was in a place where I was really burnt out emotionally and just needed to take care of myself, and to be in nature to that extent and interact with it to that extent, to have that very different relationship with the weather and whatever else, I genuinely feel like it has changed my brain chemistry and for the better.
Do you think that the exchange for emotional security and changing your lifestyle for your emotional well-being and mental well-being, do you think that exchange for being a little bit burnt out physically was worth it?
Oof. Yes, but it does go back to the investment piece, right? Like, there's no version of my life where I could continue to push myself this hard forever.
Mhm.
I am choosing to push myself this hard to build all these gardens and do all these things because I have the momentum of excitement right now. This is the youngest I'm ever going to be. And I'm doing it because I know that it's going to pay whatever rewards or whatever dividends later when I get to look at all that work and say, oh my gosh, like I did this. And I've had small glimpses of moments like that, but I can only imagine what those moments are going to be in 5-10 years. That's going to be mind blowing.
I can't even imagine that. Like, I can't. I get so excited with what we're doing now, and even the tiniest little wins and seeing the smallest projects come to fruition and be done, I'm like, wow, this is cool. So I can't even imagine what this place is going to look like in that month.
Didn't you have a moment where this first growing season where you got most of the garden in and you stopped and you looked at it and said, I did that. That is freaking cool.
I feel like that's a daily thing for me. And I don't know if it's just like my nature to try and appreciate things like that on a regular basis. But in the mornings, I walk out there and I'm like, oh my God, it's beautiful out here. And I just stand and stare at it. And I did the same thing during sunset. It's just like a constant thing. Like I'm constantly grateful for it. So I don't know if I've had a big moment of that yet, but when I get the pretty sunsets and I can look over my whole garden and see that, I definitely have those like impactful moments. Like I can think of several times throughout the summer that I felt that way. And it's usually with the sunset because I'm a very visual person.
Yeah. Along that same vein, I'm curious if any of you all who are listening along with us have had any moments like that of particular gratification with the gardens or whatever else you're working on, or if you have things that you want to share that you wish you knew before you started.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of She Said Homestead. We hope you enjoyed our chat. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Send your homesteading stories to us at shesaidhomestead@gmail.com. We can't wait to share them on the air. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram for updates and sneak peeks at what's coming up next.
If you like video podcasts, make sure you subscribe to the She Said Homestead YouTube channel too. We can't thank you enough for being part of the She Said Homestead community. Until next time, happy homesteading.